So this is accessing music education curriculum for older school age students with moderate to severe disabilities. My name is Nadia Castagna. Um, I have been teaching for about 7 years, give or take. I started out in expressive therapies and looking to go into music therapy, but then I just saw this program at Boston Conservatory in music education with an autism concentration and figured out that I really wanted to be an educator. Currently, I just enrolled in my postgraduate certificate in applied behavior analysis. So this will allow me to sit for the board certification in a couple of years. Currently, I work at the New England Center for Children in Southborough, and I also work at the Berklee Institute for Arts Education and Special Needs in their Saturday program. So I put up a little bit of an agenda so that we can kind of keep track of where we are. So right now we're at the part that says agenda, but then I'm going to talk about different aspects like structured and formal guidance, about differentiating expectations, engagement, and I also threw in a couple of reflections that are about 10 to 15 seconds, and it's just kind of reflecting on what we had just talked about to give a chance for absorption, which is actually what I'm about to go into. I'm going to lastly talk about assessing and then just give a small summary. So structured informal guidance is actually specific to the Gordon music learning theory created by Edwin Gordon. And Edwin Gordon also says that learning music is similar to learning a language. A lot of people express that music is a different language. And he also thought that exposure to different modalities and time signatures was really important for young students. However, I feel as though that the Gordon music learning theory could also be adapted for not only younger students, but older students as well, that are still in foundational years of music learning. So there's the similarity between learning language and also learning music. We both start out with listening, and then it kind of progresses from there. Just like in singing, first a student will start listening to what's going on and absorbing. That word absorbing, kind of like giving extra processing time. And that's super important. I have a lot of students that don't necessarily sing in class, but they're going to go home. And a lot of the times we hear reports from mom and dad or teachers that this particular student has been singing the entire time, every single song that we did in class. They've been pretending that they are Miss Nadia in class and running the class, kind of like role playing. So absorption really is an important part. And then we progress to speaking, thinking, reading, and writing. And both in music and language, reading and writing are last. We have to get kind of immersed first before we learn to read and write. So the teacher in structured informal guidance, a teacher will plan what to say and do, but not requiring a specific response. So I might do an activity that I call my mom and your mom. We've probably seen this before, but this is the way that I do it. My mom and your mom live across the way. When they get together, this is what they say. Ba, 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 ba. And I don't expect a response. I don't expect a student to respond. I've done entire activities where the song is set up for a response, but I'm not necessarily getting verbal responses. And interestingly, we kind of consider, I say we because I work with another colleague of mine, Miles Wilcox, and we kind of go with the aspect of any response is a response. So if a student is listening to you do that tonal pattern or that rhythmic pattern and they say, that's a response. They just did it. They did something. Or maybe they weren't looking at you at the time, and then when you started doing it, they looked at you. That's enough at that point. We're getting a lot of attention and attending to the lesson. This particular type of instruction is super important for students that are in preparatory audiation stages. And audiation is kind of just like hearing the song in your head before you sing it. Like, for instance, if you sang a pitch, do, I listened to it, I heard it in my head, I matched it, and I made it come out of my mouth. That is audiation. So here we are. This is kind of these stages of preparatory audiation are just the way that Edward Gordon has kind of set up his learning theory. The first is acculturation. So that just goes into absorption, just like we talked about. Hearing, the student will hear it and orally collect it, or I should say orally collect it, and then keep it in there and even produce it. Students will then go on to random responses, just kind of like I talked about, just kind of like, it doesn't really, they're just responding. And then there's purposeful responses where they actually really meant to do it. And whether it's correct or not, it was purposeful. Then we go on to imitation. And there's this thing called shredding egocentricity, which is kind of a really big way of saying just a student is starting to understand when they're not saying or singing the right thing. Like if I said ba 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 ba, and a student went ba ba ba, well, they're starting to understand that that didn't match. If I wanted you to match, that definitely didn't match. So then there's the breaking the code, and we're kind of getting into it where it's like, oh, if I raise my voice this way, if I lower my voice this way, this is kind of how it fits together. Lastly, we'd get into introspection and coordination. So these are aspects of kind of putting things together, looking at how they could make more meaningful responses, and produce even more activities, I guess, or even more ways to answer. So when considering curriculum for students that are a little bit older, I know that there's not really like a set state guidelines like there is, but there's not. And a lot of the stuff that we get to see during high school years are more for electives or band or chorus. But what happens when you have general music for up to students age 22? So we have to consider age appropriateness. We also have to consider cognitive appropriateness. I might have students that earn hearing songs from Sesame Street or Barney, and I actually might use those songs in order to develop a closer relationship with the student and build rapport. But I might not use those to teach, though. I would use something different that has a simple melody that would be similar to the Sesame Street or Barney song, that has maybe like a 1-5 progression or 1-4-5, something very simple melody that works for their abilities. Just like in math class, we don't divide or do long division or pre-calculus before we've even learned to count. And the same thing in music class. We can't really listen to complex sonatas or dubstep if we didn't really get to, let's just make sounds. Let's work together. Let's kind of experience music. I always consider my support staff. I am lucky to work in a school where there's basically one teacher for every student. Sometimes there's one teacher for every 2 students. So in that respect, I'm not only teaching the class of students, but I'm also teaching the support staff in order for them to know what to expect and know what I want during the class so that they can support the students best. Obviously, we have to consider modifications and adaptations, and most of all, we need to differentiate our expectations. Don't underestimate your students. It happens all the time. Don't let it happen in your class. Every student is unique. Equity is much more helpful than equality. I always think about, somebody had told me about this little picture that showed different levels of somebody looking over a fence. And if it was all the same level, the different heights of people can't all see. But if they each had something that was tall enough for them to see over the fence, then that worked out for them. And simultaneous teaching and observation, I would say you get used to it, but you know, it's hard. Simultaneous teaching and observation is hard because sometimes even I get so into watching what the kids are doing that I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, this song ends this way, or oh, I missed my beat. So just I would say have the happy balance of teaching and observation. And you can even make time in your schedule to write down small observations. You can even keep, I know you're not supposed to do this with stands, but you can even keep a stand and like write stuff down on a notebook. So we are going to scooch on over to engagement. I find it important for transitions to have an opening and a closing song. This way we know and establish that music is starting and stopping and that we will see each other again soon. However, that particular time frame is over. I have students that have very challenging times transitioning from their classroom, walking down to the music room. Sometimes these can be hard and maybe even unexpected. So it's always good to have a starting and an ending. Engagement is going to look different for every student. Eye contact and calm body are not always a requirement. Sometimes, like I have students that I don't have to make eye contact or they don't have to have a calm body in order to respond. But then I do have some students that we need to attend, which means folding our hands, making eye contact, and having a calm body. And sometimes that works for them, and sometimes it doesn't. So engagement is different for everyone, especially if we have students that are pre-verbal and non-verbal in class. There are a few different ways that we can include students. I've listed out some of the ways: modeling, choice boards, typing in a chat if you're online, assistance from parents, teachers, caregivers, answering with numbers on a device with their words. So I want you to kind of think about different ways of including students in the responses. So my prompt here is going to be, you are teaching about instruments of the orchestra to a diverse group of students. Think about 2 ways that your student could access this material and how they might respond to questions about their learning. If it's helpful, you can also think about a student that you have in class already and kind of think about ways to go about this. I'll give you 10 seconds and then we'll move on. All right, so we're moving on. Lastly, I just wanted to say that growth mindset, having a growth mindset is important. If we have a fixed mindset, then we kind of get predetermined connotations of students and what their abilities are. But if we have a growth mindset, we're always looking to do better. We're always looking to improve, getting more skills, having more fun, getting better, all these different things. I put different examples on the screen that you can read through, but it really works for every student, regardless of ability. So I always tell teachers in my classroom that I really want participation more than I want perfection. If they're not doing the same exact thing that I'm doing, that's quite okay. We're flexible in music class. Communication is going to be the most important piece, especially communicating what you want from teachers. Like, hey, teachers, it's okay if a student only does this. It's okay if they're tapping the drum, but it's not full force. We'll get there. Things like that. Have patience. I had a student for 5 years before he actually started matching pitch. So patience. And above all, try everything. Don't limit it. I have students try the trombone, the trumpet, the flute, the recorder. We try ukuleles. We try any and everything we can get our hands on. We do world music, we do rhythm, beat, form. Don't think they can't do that. That's not growth mindset. You can think, hey, this is the first time that we're doing this, and let's see how it goes. And here are some things that I can do to titrate this to make this even better for next time. Some supports for class. Your biggest is going to be communication, especially if you work in a private school for autism. That's the kind of school that I work at for students with moderate to severe autism that are prone to challenging behavior. So I have a school full of teachers, and in any given classroom, we could have 10 to 12 teachers plus me. So I'm communicating to each of those teachers that are prompting their students, depending on level of ability, to say what would be acceptable for that particular student, because it's going to change. And I've noticed that it changes from the classroom to the music classroom. Sometimes students demonstrate all kinds of different things that they don't typically do in class, or in their general education class, I should say. So parents, caregivers, specialists, so that's OT, occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, any other therapy that your school may or may not have. Making sure that everybody is on the same page, my categories. So the next thing that I would like to talk about is the hierarchy of prompting. And this is something that we don't typically talk about in education. It's more like psychology, behavior, things like that. We do talk about prompting, but it doesn't go as in depth. So something that I want to chat about is least instructive or intrusive, going to most intrusive or restrictive. There we go. Oh my goodness. Intrusive or restrictive. Interchangeable. So the first thing that we need to do is get a baseline. Always get a baseline before you start anything, because what if you prompt and you don't need to? What if the student just does it and then you're just going to be prompting for no reason? Or what if you don't prompt and the student needs it? Get a baseline first. Observe. Watch the student do it a couple times, then intervene. So the first, I shouldn't say intervention, I should say like a little bit more restrictive would be a verbal prompt, like a question or a request. Put your drum away. Can you sit down? What should you be doing right now? Things like that. You can also, the next more intrusive after that would be to point, like a nonverbal cue. If the student didn't put their drum away, you could point to the drum, or you could point to where it needs to go. This is also nonverbal. You don't need to put words with the gesture. Sometimes you can, but it's not needed. A visual prompt would be showing a picture or a schedule, like first this, then this. Drumming is all done. Now we need to put it away. The next one after that would be modeling. So I'm in front of the student, modeling how it should be done or how I would like them to do it, where it should go. And the last would be physical guidance. So hand over hand. There's also a little bit of variations to physical guidance, more like there's also guiding instead of like hand over hand, which is taking the hand of the student and you know, hitting the drum with your hand. Or there's also guiding from the elbow, just like gentle touching, or guiding from just above the wrist. There's also a few props and instruments that we use. The biggest ones I love are the stretchy band and the octoband. These different items are just, they look like a giant hair scrunchie. And they promote a lot of joint attention and a lot of cooperation because honestly, like, you know, it only stretches so much. You kind of got to go with the group. I always choose instruments that are durable. I try and stay away from wood. My students have a lot of pica and they mouth a lot of the instruments, so wood is very porous. So I try and get plastic or vinyl. You can get vinyl bean bags at Go for Sport. So that's another thing. I also do choice boards. Students need choice boards. These are just examples of choice boards that I have used. I worked with the speech department to create these, and whoever They send out paper copies that can be laminated, and they also load these onto the students' devices because I am a school full of iPads for almost every single student. I believe 40 I want to say at least half of the students at my school use an AAC device, an alternative communication device. So having things on a device is very important. The last couple things I wanted to show are some visuals that I've used. I'm going to go a little bit quicker. These are just examples of rhythm that I have used. I put color and food words. We are very food motivated at my school. So we put food words. It also helps with speech. The speech department likes it. This is an example of a form activity that I did. I always like to use color. It helps. You can also put what you would like them to do. I think in this circumstance, we were listening to Humorosque, and these are just different actions I wanted them to do. And you can even make it even more basic, even more simple for students to look at if they need it. So one section per page instead of all of them. I also teach electives, so piano class. This is what our music looks like when we start out. These are 2 half notes. So I just, super quick, they just change the color. I might change it to this. Now we get 4 lines per page instead of 2. And I might introduce the treble clef. I might even put rhythm to it. So quarter note, half note. So short, short, long. I tell teachers all the time, you can say short, short, long. You can say 1, 2, 3, whatever you would like, whatever helps your student. If I had 2 mouths, I would say it at the same time. I might introduce something like a rest, but I always make it really distinctive. I do chorus. A lot of the students that I work with are between the ages of 12 and 22, the majority of them. So we do chorus as well, breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth because you need to practice breath. Here's an example of different things that we need to do. Breathe in your nose, catch a bubble, hold your breath, breathe through your teeth. Vocal warm-ups, they can trace the page and make their voice match. There are a couple of different warm-ups I used when I did voice therapy because I had nodes for a while, so I had to go to voice therapy. So we did different activities like wow, 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 or like whoop, boom. So accessing different parts of your voice. I found, interestingly enough, I found that the students that I work with respond better to pictures of hand signs than they do if I just put the lyrics up there. And we just learned by listening. They actually learn a lot better by seeing it too. So here's an example of us doing a scale. And this is an example of a song, Sweetly the Swan, that we do just as a warm-up song. I put ukulele chords because I have a few students that are interested in playing ukulele, and this is a great song to do it to because you only have to do the C chord. I put the lyrics, what I want them to sing, and then how it's going to look. So do-de-a-do, do-de-a-do, do-de-a-do. And we'll go slow and work up to getting faster. Lastly, for assessing is just tiered questioning. I'm going to go super fast. Tiered questioning is just building up confidence. It's allowing you to ask questions that are a little bit different for everybody's ability levels and allows students to access curriculum. So a tier 1 question would be a choice between one or the other. Even more simple than this. Do you want this? Do you want this? In the video that we saw, Ray Charles, did he play the trumpet or did he play the piano? You know, a tier 2 question. So this would be like next level up. Tier 1 is basic level, an either or question. Tier 2, next level up, can still be a clear answer. It still has it, but you can increase the number of choices. So maybe instead of 2 choices, you have 4. And it can also be more of like an observation. What color was the drum set? You know, maybe not providing a choice board, but you have the option to. And lastly, tier 3, and you can make more tiers if you think there are more. I just took like a very basic version. So a tier 3 question would be open-ended. So no correct answer at all. It can be like, what did you think? So I gave an example. What did you notice about the music in the video? And the video that I was thinking of at the time was a black and white video. So I thought, maybe the students will notice that it's not in color. Maybe they won't. So then students can say, oh, I noticed this, you know. So I'm going to skip the reflection because I think that we're running out of time. All of these things put together equal equity and accessibility, which is super important for students, especially students that have moderate to severe disabilities and really like need the extra support accessing the curriculum. So modifications, adaptations, don't underestimate your students. I put just a small summary on this last page that kind of sums up what we were kind of talking about. And I also put a few links on here to the music education curriculum, where I work at both of my schools, the picture website that I use to get some pictures from, and another resource that has a whole bunch of different I said resource, but resources for teaching music to diverse learners. So there's a lot of good stuff on here. And also, if you have any questions or concerns or just want to chat, I would love to. And my information is at the bottom.